You're shooting a film, you have 50 scenes to film and only 10 days to shoot it. What is the most efficient way to schedule your shoot in order to maximize the amount of time you have available to you and capitalize on your resources? Welcome back to Filmmaking for Noobs. In this season, we have been going through the entire filmmaking process from start to finish, how to create your own film. If you are new to filmmaking and you are working toward creating your first or second or third film, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend going back and watching the first episode of this season of Filmmaking for Noobs and following along as I walk you through the entire process of creating your film from start to finish. Scheduling. How do you efficiently schedule all of the scenes in your film? How do you maximize on the resources that you have during the course of your schedule? And how do you make sure that you don't miss a scene? We're covering all of that in this episode. We're looking specifically at how to schedule your entire shoot and how to spread all of your scenes and locations out across however many days you have available for filming in the most efficient way possible. In another episode, I did already cover how to plan out and schedule each individual day as far as the order of scenes and shots that you're going to shoot. There's a link to that episode in the description of this video below. Obviously, if you have a short film set in only one location, this is going to be a much simpler process for you and won't be anywhere near as complicated. However, if we were to look at this from an average example of, let's say we have 50 scenes in a feature film and they take place across 12 different locations. And by locations, I'm really referring to sets. You might have a bedroom set and a kitchen set, but they might take place in the same house or might be actually filmed in real life in the same location. So that is technically one location, but we're going to call that two sets. I'm going to walk you through this process and you can adapt it to fit the needs of your film. So working with our example of 50 scenes and 12 locations, our first step is simply determining how many days we want to plan on filming. Some feature films are shot in only 10 to 15 days, whereas other feature films may take 6 to 9 months or more. And by 6 to 9 months, no, I don't mean that they're just shooting on the weekends for 9 months. They're actually shooting 5 days a week for 9 months with prep crews likely working on the other 2 days during the week. Most likely as an independent, low budget, small time filmmaker, whatever you want to call yourself, you're probably not going to have the resources or the commitment of crew and cast in order to shoot 5 days a week for 9 months. So that is not within the realm of possibilities for a really small project. You are most likely going to be very limited in the amount of time that you have available, so you do have to figure out strategic ways in order to maximize a very short shoot time that you have available for filming. The longer you shoot, the more time you'll have available for each scene, which means you can give a lot more attention to detail and hopefully have much higher production value. But at the same time, the more time you plan on shooting, the more days you spend on set, the more costly and expensive it becomes for you when you add up the cost of gear rentals, locations, especially if you're paying cast and crew and feeding your cast and crew. One major factor in this is determining your target daily page count. What that means is simply determining what your goal is for how many pages you plan on shooting each day on average. Now, of course, from day to day, your page count may fluctuate because you may have some days where you have some really complex, high action, high stunts, whatever scenes that require lots of shots. And that you might not be able to shoot as many pages during the course of the day because you're shooting way more shots. However, there may be other days where your page count can be quite a bit higher because it's just a handful of scenes with a couple actors sitting at a table talking, very few shots required and very few changes and setups involved, and so it's really simple to do a much higher page count. Your page count is referring to the number of pages in a script that you're filming in one day. To give you some reference, a DC Comics superhero TV series is usually filming about 8 to 10 days per episode, which is a 50-page or so script, roughly. Those shows do have some days where they film 7 to 9 pages during the course of the day, and other days where they may only film 1 to 3 pages if they're really heavy on stunts and action. And there are some shows that will take even more time to film the same number of pages. For example, a series of unfortunate events will film the same number of pages in about 12 to 13 days. roughly. And big budget shows like Game of Thrones obviously break the mold, and there was one episode in their 6th season which was a 100-day shooting schedule with 60 consecutive night shoots. So really, the truth is you can spend as little or as much time as you can afford. The more time you spend, the more costly it's going to be, but the more time you have to focus on each detail of every scene, the less time you have available to you, the less it's going to cost, but the quicker you have to move and get things done, obviously. To help you gauge what will work best for your shoot, here are a few things to think about. Shooting 1 to 2 pages each day is a pretty slow pace. Now, of course, if you have some really complex scenes with lots of shots or lots of action or lots of stunts or lots of special effects, you might need to limit a couple days to only 1 or 2 pages in order to get all the shots that you need. But for the average scene, for a scene where characters are just sitting at tables, talking or walking around a room having conversations, 1 to 2 pages is a pretty slow pace. This is kind of your high budget feature type pace. Many higher budget feature films will limit themselves to only 1 or 2, maybe 3 pages per day so they can really focus on all the details. However, if you're shooting basic simple scenes at this slow of a pace without requiring a bunch of shots and stunts, it can become pretty boring for some of the cast and crew. Shooting 4 to 6 pages per day is a pretty comfortable pace to move at. For example, a 100-page script shooting 5 pages per day would be about 20 shoot days, which is pretty manageable for a small or low budget project. Shooting 8 to 10 pages per day is a bit more fast pace. If you have an on-set crew of 100 people and you also have a prep crew who is dressing the set early and pre-lighting, or doing a little bit of pre-lighting at least, then 8 to 10 pages is pretty manageable during the course of a day. Otherwise, with a smaller crew, then 8 to 10 pages is a little bit run and gun, or maybe even a little bit ambitious, depending on what level of production value you're aiming for. Anything more than 10 pages per day, with some exceptions of course, is going to be pretty ambitious and probably not going to be the ideal way to shoot a film. Obviously there are exceptions to that, or if you are not really concerned about lighting or production value, then it's a little bit more doable, but I hope you really are paying attention to lighting and production value. So for our example of a 100-page script with 50 scenes in 12 locations, let's just say that we would like to target 7 pages per day on average. This comes out to be about 14.2 days, or we'll round up to 15 days. 15 days is a pretty manageable schedule for many low-budget feature films. Genre is also an important thing to keep in mind when determining your targeted daily page count. A drama, a simple comedy, or something to that extent, something that doesn't require a whole lot of stunts or action or special effects, is likely going to be much easier to shoot a higher page count during the course of a day. If you're shooting something with a lot of stunts, special effects, or action, then a 15-day or 20-day shoot may be a little ambitious and you might require a bit more time. Yes, it has been done and it can be done. Many of the WWE television movies are shot in only 15 days or so. I haven't been on set for any of those, but in the ones that I have worked on, when I process the dailies at night and I'm watching through all the footage, I can tell you that the evidence is there that it's a pretty run and gun shoot. As you add more complexities to your script, such as action, stunts, special effects, special makeup, special wardrobe, or set dressing from different time periods, that increases the amount of time it takes to maintain a high production value. As you add complexities to your script, such as action, stunts, special effects, special makeup or prosthetics, special wardrobe or set dressing from different time periods, each of those complexities will increase the amount of time required in order to maintain the same high production value. Yes, a shot list is ultimately important once you get to filming, but you do not yet require a shot list to simply determine the number of days required to shoot your film. But you should have a good understanding of how complex or how simple the majority of your scenes are. It doesn't hurt to add 1 or 2 extra days just in case. And as mentioned in another episode, yes, your shot list ultimately does become very important when planning out your day-to-day schedule and determining the order in which you're going to shoot your shots and scenes during each individual shoot day. To give you a few examples of the number of days required for some of my past projects, my first feature that I directed, called The Scarf, we shot in 15 days over the course of 3 weeks. My second feature, called Logan, we shot in 28 days over the course of 6.5 weeks. It was very nice having those extra few days for the same number of pages. More recently, my film No Internet was shot in 6 days over the course of 2 months, but that's because it was in 2020. So you can imagine why that took longer. To quickly summarize before moving on, you should first determine the number of days required for your shoot. To do this, here are some factors to consider. Page count, how many pages do you hope to shoot on each day on average? Budget, how many days can you actually afford to pay for locations, gear rentals, meals, crafty, and your cast and crew? Time commitment, how much time can your cast and crew realistically dedicate to your project? And other limiting factors to consider, such as if you're working with a lot of young actors, children, teens, many of them are going to be restricted to how many hours they can work in one day. And if you have a restriction for how many hours you can shoot in one day, whether it's only 8 or 10 hours, then that also may limit your page count for that day. Moving on, in our example, we have determined that we're going to plan on a 15-day shoot. If you're planning on 20 days, 25 days, 30 days, that's even better. The next question is, how do you efficiently schedule your shoot? There are generally 3 different schools of thought in order to determine the order in which you schedule the scenes across however many shoot days you have available to you. The first is script order. You can attempt to film your entire script as close to in chronological order as possible. If you have some sort of really crazy continuity to maintain, which will be difficult to maintain otherwise, then maybe this is the route to go, but shooting in script order is likely also the most inefficient way that you could possibly shoot your film. The second is favor cast. In this model, you are scheduling your shoot based on the availability of your cast and grouping scenes together based on which cast they require. For example, you may jump around from one location to the next location in order to shoot out an actor and then come back to that same location 8 days later to film other scenes that don't require such and such actor. Depending on how many casts you're working with and what their availability looks like, this may be an efficient or inefficient way to schedule your shoot. The third is to favor locations. In this model, you are coordinating your schedule based on the availability of locations, or you are grouping all of your shooting days by location in order to shoot out an entire location before moving on to the next location. From a production's perspective, this is usually the most efficient way to go. However, if you do have some out-of-town casts who are then sitting around for multiple days not being used while waiting for you to move on to the next location, this could be a little bit unfavorable to them or could be more costly to you. I definitely prefer to favor locations as much as possible because I absolutely hate company moves. Anytime that I can avoid a company move, which is where we pack up all the gear and move the entire cast and crew from one location to another, I like to avoid that. You don't have to strictly choose only one of these 3 models. You can definitely combine aspects or elements of 2 or 3 of these different models, or you can choose to prioritize one model, such as the location favor schedule, but then still grant some favor to cast and try to keep things in scene order within the course of a day as much as possible. So it's definitely possible to mold or mesh many of these models together, or even try other models as well. There's a pretty fine balance between the cast favored and the location favored schedule, and those 2 models are likely the most commonly used. On the day-to-day schedule, even if you are working with a mostly location-favored schedule, it's also really nice to secondarily favor the cast, even in a location-favored schedule. What I mean by that is if you have 10 scenes that you're shooting in one location, and you're going to spend 3 days shooting those 10 scenes in one location, if you have one actor who's only in 6 of those scenes, it's probably really nice for that actor if you schedule those 6 scenes on only 1 or 2 of those days, so that the actor is only required for 1 or 2 days and has the 3rd day off. In the film world, the schedule is referred to as a one-line schedule or a one-liner. This is the industry standard form for publishing your schedule, and it looks like this. The beginning of each new day will tell you which shoot day it is, such as day 1, day 4, etc. Then there is one line, hence the name one-liner, which represents each scene scheduled for that day. Each one-line row tells you all information you need to know. The scene number, the set, a short single-line description of that scene, something that helps people remember what the scene is, whether it is day or night, which actors are required for that scene, and how many pages that scene is. Then the end of each day will include something that signifies the end of that day, along with the date and the total page count for that day. It is best to stick to this format when creating your schedules because this is the format that anyone who works in film is already familiar with, is expecting to see, and they already know how to find whatever information they need without any issues. Do not try to reinvent the wheel. Do not try to create your own format. Simply learn how to read and use the one-liner and stick to it. There are many people that work full-time in film. They'll often work on maybe 20 or even up to 40 different projects during the course of a year. The reason why the film industry works as well as it does, and the reason why everyone moving from show to show doesn't require a long onboarding process, is because every show sticks to the industry standards and follows standard procedures. There is a link in the description of this video for you to download a template to help you creating your own one-liner. And lastly, one of the biggest mistakes that you could make when creating a schedule is by forgetting to schedule a scene. It is a costly mistake. Don't make that mistake. Break down your script. Make a script order list of each scene. As you add the scene to the schedule, check off those scenes. Once you've finished the schedule, go back and double check and check off each scene again to make sure it's actually still on the schedule. When creating the breakdown and list of scenes, it is important to use a different item on your list in order to schedule any other pieces of a scene that you plan on shooting separately. This is often one of the easiest ways to miss or forget a scene, or at least part of a scene. For example, let's say in scene 9, our character receives a phone call, and you would like to also shoot the other side of the phone call to see the other character who's on the phone with that character. Remember to schedule that as 2 separate parts to the same scene, because most likely they're taking place in 2 different locations, also likely on 2 different days, even though they're both part of scene 9. So you should have scene 9 part 1 and scene 9 part 2. Those should be 2 separate items on your list when you're going through and checking off which scenes have been scheduled, and they should also be 2 separate items on your one-line schedule. In a montage scene, you may have multiple beats or sets that are all under the same scene heading in the script. Make sure you plan out which shots and sets you will require for that montage, and schedule each of those as a separate item on your list and on your schedule. If you have been following along with the challenge of this season of Filmmaking for Noobs and are planning to create your first or next film shortly after this season concludes, then your homework for this week is to start drafting up a sample schedule. I do understand that we may still be months away from even needing a schedule, maybe months away from having locations and cast secured, but this is a great opportunity, especially if you have never done this before, or if you're working with a producing partner or an AD who does not have very much experience either. This is a great opportunity for you to get some practice in and start lining up how it might possibly work out and how your schedule may end up coming together. Thanks for watching Filmmaking for Noobs. There's more coming next week. I do appreciate reading comments below, and I definitely appreciate it if you like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.